What is so funny?
It's this joke book. Listen to this one, Lily. It'll kill you.
Everyone thought the Munsters was just a silly family show. But behind those laughs was a nightmare no one saw coming. Actors collapsed from heat exhaustion daily. Medical staff stayed on set full-time. And that's not even the worst part. One actress was so miserable she cried between takes and needed prescription drugs just to get through filming. She literally prayed every night for the show to fail so she could escape. When her co-stars demanded her release, production shut down for 3 days. What CBS buried will absolutely shock you today. By 1964, CBS was in trouble. The network that once ruled American television was starting to lose ground to ABC. For nearly a decade, CBS had been unbeatable, dominating ratings from 1955 into the early 60s. But now, Thursday nights at 7:30 p.m. were slipping away, and with them, millions of viewers and the advertising dollars that kept the rest of the network running. Executives were desperate. They held long, stressful meetings late into the night, trying to find something, anything, that would grab both kids and adults at the same time. At one of those meetings, someone actually said, "What if Frankenstein had a family?" They weren't joking. What they needed was a family sitcom, but not the same kind viewers had already seen 100 times. It had to feel fresh. It had to stand out. But according to research, anything with monsters was considered too scary for a family show. So taking that idea and making it work was a gamble, a huge one. If they pulled it off, the show could reach up to 30 million viewers a week. If they failed, it could crash their whole fall lineup. So CBS turned to two men who had already created one of the most beloved American families on TV, Joe Connolly and Bob Mosher, the writers behind Leave It to Beaver. That show had ended the year before after 234 episodes that practically defined what it meant to be a wholesome American sitcom. The CBS executives didn't just want them, they needed them. But instead of giving the network another clean-cut suburban family, Connolly flipped the idea on its head. He said, "What if the monsters were the normal ones and everyone else was strange?" At first, Universal Studios hated it. They rejected the pitch 3 times, calling it too weird, too risky, and completely out of step with mainstream America. But something changed when they showed the idea to a group of kids. Instead of being scared, the kids laughed. They thought the monsters were funny. That one test changed everything. And in April 1964, the project was approved. But what followed was far from easy. Fred Gwynne, who played Herman Munster, quickly found out the costume was more of a punishment than a uniform. His day began before sunrise. He arrived around 5:30 in the morning and sat through 2 hours of makeup before stepping into a 50-pound outfit. The boots had soles made from asphalt pavers, adding 4 inches to his height. The headpiece was so heavy, it caused lasting damage to his neck. He needed physical therapy and painkillers just to get through the day. On one of the first days of shooting, he passed out from heat exhaustion. After that, medics had to check his pulse and blood pressure after almost every take. He was sweating so much he drank up to 6 gallons of lemonade every day and still lost 10 pounds during the first season. Sometimes, the crew had to use air hoses to cool him down between scenes because regular fans didn't work. And even with all of that, he called the role a dog, a job he took only for the money. He was paid $200,000 a year, but what it cost him physically was far worse. By the time the show ended in 1966, his back problems were permanent. And Gwynne wasn't the only one suffering. The makeup process for the entire cast took more than 8 hours a day. Al Lewis, who played Grandpa, sat through 3.5 hours each morning to have wrinkles and age spots painted on his face one by one. Ivonne DiCarlo, playing Lily Munster, had to be covered in gray body makeup that would melt off under the studio lights until a waterproof formula was invented just for her. The makeup budget alone was over $50,000 per episode, more than the entire cost of some other shows. Getting the makeup off wasn't much better. They had to use harsh chemicals that caused rashes and allergic reactions. DeCarlo even needed medical treatment for skin problems during the second season. Over time, the makeup delays became so bad, they pushed filming back by hours, costing Universal thousands of dollars. And this was happening almost every day. Between them, the actors spent more than 5,600 hours in makeup chairs. That number alone shows how much pain was hidden behind all the campy charm. Even the set was brutal. The famous Munster mansion, 1313 Mockingbird Lane, was built on Universal's backlot, but there was no air conditioning. The heat from all the studio lights made it feel like an oven. Temperatures often soared past 100 degrees. The basement scenes were filmed in a fake below-ground set that made the actors feel boxed in and claustrophobic. A few guest stars even had panic attacks. Then there were the fog machines. They were used to create spooky effects, but they filled the set with chemical mist. Fred Gwynne had to use a nebulizer because the fog was so bad it gave him breathing problems. Ivonne DeCarlo sprained her ankle tripping on the famously steep staircase that had been built at an odd angle just to get better camera shots. And somewhere on the lot, Universal kept hidden cameras running, secretly filming the cast during breakdowns between takes, moments they never intended the public to see. All of this sounds unreal, but it only gets worse. The actors were legally forbidden from speaking about any of it. Their contracts included gag orders to protect the show's happy image. Meanwhile, temperatures kept rising. One day in 1965, the heat hit 110 degrees. Filming was delayed, but not canceled. They just pushed through it. The fog machines kept running. The lights kept burning. The actors kept sweating. Behind the scenes, medical staff were on standby. IVs were used for rehydration, and workers' comp claims from injuries and illnesses were quietly filed away and sealed for decades. These weren't just complaints. They were serious. Back problems, breathing issues, dehydration. Gwynne lost 10 pounds. Others collapsed. Some crew members suffered minor electrical shocks from the overworked lighting rigs, which drew more power than many movies. It wasn't a set. It was a pressure cooker. And then there were the special effects. For a sitcom in the 1960s, the Munsters did the impossible. Grandpa's bat transformation? It took wire rigs and practical effects that failed more than half the time. Some scenes had to be redone 20 times just to get it right. The sound effects weren't edited in later. They were performed live, in real time, which meant that if someone mistimed a creaking door or a thunderclap, the whole take was ruined. That happened a lot. Camera operators had to work in near darkness to get the spooky lighting right, and that led to accidents. One tripod collapsed in 1965 and injured a crew member. The lighting setups used over 100 specialized bulbs. The electricity usage per episode was off the charts, and yet somehow, through all of this chaos, they still managed to finish each episode on time. But it came at a cost. Behind every laugh was exhaustion. Behind every scene was a studio crew working through sweat, injuries, breakdowns, and fear of failure. Nobody knew back then, but what they were doing would later be studied by researchers as a case of occupational stress and poor working conditions. On the night the Munsters first aired, everything was on the edge of collapse. The pilot episode, Munster Masquerade, was supposed to introduce America to a strange new family, but behind the scenes, it was chaos. The final cut was delivered just hours before it hit the air. People were literally running the film reel to CBS, praying it wouldn't miss the slot. Some execs wanted to cancel it on the spot. They thought the show was just too weird, too creepy, Too out there for American families still hooked on Leave It to Beaver. They imagined angry phone calls, and they weren't wrong. Within 30 minutes of the premiere, more than 500 complaint calls flooded CBS. Most came from parents, furious that their kids were watching Munsters at dinner time. And just when things couldn't get worse, in several cities, the opening credits aired upside down. The audience had no idea if it was a mistake or some bizarre part of the show. And yet, 18.5 million people watched it that night. That's a quarter of all U.S. households. It instantly became one of the biggest debuts of 1964. And somehow, all the mayhem became part of the charm. The episode had the Munsters winning a costume contest just by showing up as themselves. A quiet little joke that poked fun at the whole idea of normalcy. That first black and white episode turned a near disaster into a national sensation. The original unaired color pilot never made it to TV, but the version that aired is what stuck. It wasn't just a silly monster comedy. It tapped into the weirdness bubbling under America's perfect suburban image. Right at the height of civil rights tension, here was a show quietly whispering, maybe being different isn't so bad after all. But the Munsters weren't the only spooky family on the block. Just 1 week earlier, The Addams Family had premiered on ABC, and suddenly, the networks had a monster brawl on their hands. Every Thursday at 7:30, CBS pitted the Munsters directly against their rivals. It wasn't accidental. Internal memos later revealed CBS knew exactly what they were doing. By the end of the year, the Munsters were everywhere. They brought in over $10 million in merch. Think toys, costumes, records. That would be around $80 million today. Still, even with all this success, the bubble popped fast. Just 2 years later, both shows were canceled. Batman had swooped in with color, action, and a new kind of camp, stealing the younger audience overnight. But what the ratings didn't show was how divided Hollywood really was over the Munsters. Some critics loved it. Others absolutely hated it. The New York Times called it the worst thing ever shown on television. TV Guide, on the other hand, listed it among the best. Churches slammed it. Parents groups tried to boycott it. Some CBS affiliates in the Bible Belt refused to air episodes altogether. Things got so heated that CBS had to threaten stations with contract breaches to force them to keep airing it. Internationally, certain countries wouldn't even buy the show. In the Middle East, officials said it promoted monster imagery and refused to let it run. Yet despite all this, the show somehow landed a Golden Globe nomination in 1965. It was a strange badge of honor. A show labeled as grotesque, boycotted, banned, still being celebrated by the industry. And underneath all the comedy, there were moments that quietly pushed boundaries, like when Herman Munster made a speech about treating everyone the same, no matter what they look like. That wasn't just sitcom fluff, it was a message hiding in plain sight. Meanwhile, the Munster craze exploded. Halloween costume sales jumped by 400% in 1964. Herman's Frankenstein look even outsold witches and ghosts. The theme song, just a funky instrumental, made it to number 61 on the Billboard Hot 100, selling over 100,000 copies. Fan mail arrived at a rate of more than 10,000 letters a week, swamping CBS. Kids wanted to be like Eddie. Adults loved the satire. Tourists started showing up at Universal Studios by the thousands, just to catch a glimpse of the house at 1313 Mockingbird Lane. But not everyone was enjoying the ride. Beverly Owen, who played Marilyn Munster, was quietly falling apart. Just 22 years old, she'd left New York and her fiancé behind under a brutal 5-year contract. Every night, she'd pray for the show to fail. She wasn't exaggerating. She literally dropped to her knees and whispered, "Please, God, Let this fail so I can go home." On set, she cried between takes. Her makeup was often ruined. Filming had to stop for as long as 45 minutes at a time while she tried to pull herself together. Ivonne DiCarlo and the rest of the cast watched it happen. It got so bad that Owen was secretly prescribed Valium. She started losing weight, 15 pounds gone by the time she finished her 13 episodes. When you re-watch early episodes and see her distant stare or teary eyes, it wasn't acting. It was heartbreak, caught on camera. Then, something almost unheard of happened. Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis walked into the producer's office and demanded her release. They didn't ask, they demanded. For over 2 hours, they argued. At one point, Lewis slammed his fist on the desk. "You're destroying that girl's life for a damn television show," he shouted. Security was called. Gwynne threatened to quit. Lewis said they'd take the whole cast with them. Production stopped for 3 days. The delay cost $45,000, close to $400,000 today. CBS pushed back. They were paying Owen $100 and $200 per episode and didn't want to lose her while the show was pulling in 25 million viewers every week. But the pressure worked. Owen was finally let go. What followed was a carefully orchestrated switch. Pat Priest was brought in. She was exactly Owen's height, body type, and even wore the same shoe size, 7.5, so that none of the 28 already tailored costumes had to be altered. When the crew arrived on the day of the transition, they had no idea. Confused whispers delayed filming by over an hour. To keep it all quiet, CBS destroyed over 500 promotional photos featuring Owen. They spent $10,000 redoing everything in one weekend. They even edited reruns to cut 40% of her screen time, swapping in close-ups of Priest using early green screen tricks. Then, they fed the press a fake story, something about a sudden family emergency in Ohio. It was a lie, but it worked. Most fans never noticed the switch. Behind the scenes, though, Owen's exit sparked revenge. Furious producers blacklisted her. In calls to at least 15 casting directors, they labeled her unstable, unreliable, even dangerous. Her agency dropped her. Auditions dried up. She lost roles in shows like Bewitched and Gilligan's Island. Even a theater gig in the Glass Menagerie was pulled after anonymous warnings. She applied for 22 voiceover jobs in 1965 and 1966. Every single one turned her down. Meanwhile, Ivonne DiCarlo had once ruled the silver screen. She played queens and temptresses, stood beside Charlton Heston in The Ten Commandments, and was known across Hollywood as one of Universal's brightest stars. But by the early 1960s, her world was crumbling. In 1962, her husband was crushed under a train while filming How the West Was Won. He lost his leg and nearly lost his life. Doctors saved him, but the hospital bills soared past $200,000, the kind of money that could bury even the most successful families. Ivonne mortgaged her home, sold off her jewelry, and watched as her glamorous life turned into a daily struggle to survive. When the role of Lily Munster was offered to her in 1964, it didn't feel like a win. It felt like surrender. Her agent warned her not to do it. Television, especially a monster comedy, was seen as a huge step down for someone who used to grace Technicolor epics. But Ivonne needed the money. She took the job, and she hid something else. She was secretly 3 months pregnant with her second son when filming began. She knew if producers found out, they'd replace her. So she kept it quiet. She showed up every day, wore heavy layers of green makeup, sat through hours in the chair without flinching, and smiled for the cameras, all while carrying the weight of a baby and a financial nightmare. That desperation showed behind the scenes. She didn't step out of her dressing room when called. Some days, the crew waited for hours. burning through budget and patience. Her co-stars, Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis, had no tolerance for diva behavior. They weren't Hollywood veterans. They were tough New York actors who saw this job as work, not fantasy. One day, they snapped. Words were exchanged. Voices rose. Ivonne, furious, hurled a makeup compact straight at Gwynne's chest. It didn't injure him, but it shocked everyone. After that, the studio had to assign someone just to watch her door and report if she was coming out on time. It wasn't until producers threatened to fire her that she backed down. But something shifted. Gwynne later admitted he doubted her at first, but after that blow-up, respect grew. They found a rhythm, the tension faded, and the show started to work. But that wasn't the only secret. For years, DeCarlo had lied about her age to keep getting roles. She was 41 when the Munsters began filming, making her 8 months older than the man who played her father on the show. Al Lewis was 40, but his makeup made him look ancient. Hers had to do the opposite. She spent up to 3 hours in the chair every morning, just to look like the younger one. No one questioned it until insurance forms in the 70s exposed her real birth date. Suddenly, tabloids had a field day. Lily Munster was older than Grandpa, they joked. Al teased her about it on set, too, but Ivonne laughed it off later in interviews. Still, the truth stung. She had spent years fighting off roles that labeled her too old, and she wasn't even 50. Even with a regular TV paycheck, things were tight. The accident lawsuit against MGM dragged on, and most of her income vanished into legal fees. She was making $500 an episode, and with 70 episodes total, it should have felt like a lifeline. But by the time she paid the lawyers, kept up the house, and raised her 2 boys, there was barely anything left. On weekends, she secretly worked at a department store in Beverly Hills, selling cosmetics just to bring in a little more. She'd wear sunglasses and hope no one recognized her. Once, when money got really bad, she sold $50,000 worth of family heirloom jewelry to cover the bills. The cast noticed she was tense, sometimes snappy, but once they understood what she was going through, the judgment softened. She wasn't just a fading star with an ego. She was a mother fighting to hold her life together. At the same time, CBS made a decision that nearly doomed the show. Color television was becoming the new normal, and rivals like Bewitched were already broadcasting in full color. The Munsters even had a vibrant, colorful pilot episode shot in Technicolor. But CBS didn't want to spend the extra $10,000 per episode, even though they had a $2 million budget. They claimed black and white was an artistic choice, a nod to classic monster films. But private memos revealed it was just a way to save money. Viewers who saw the color pilot during early screenings loved it, but the network ignored them. That one decision cost the show thousands of potential fans, and many believe it contributed to the cancellation after just 2 seasons. It wasn't just the color. Makeup and costume budgets were slashed, too. Fred Gwynne's massive Frankenstein suit wasn't cleaned for weeks, leading to a nasty infection that sent him home sick. Al Lewis and Beverly Owen had to buy their own supplies. DeCarlo's wigs, imported from Paris, became a hot-button issue. They cost more than the wardrobe for 3 other cast members combined, and CBS executives weren't happy. In one budget meeting, they exploded over the $15,000 wig expense. By summer 1965, the tension was so high that DeCarlo even threatened to quit. Her boots were falling apart, the makeup was irritating her skin, and the long hours under hot stage lights with no air conditioning pushed everyone to the edge. Even the set was dangerous. It was built with cheap materials to save $20,000, and the corners they cut nearly cost lives. One day, a wall gave out and collapsed during filming. It barely missed young Butch Patrick and broke a crew member's arm. The electric wiring was a disaster. Fires broke out 3 times over 2 seasons, one destroying valuable props. Safety measures were ignored until a beam nearly crushed a cameraman. By the end of Season 2, OSHA had a file full of violations. They called the set a ticking time bomb. It wasn't just what happened on screen that made life hard. Off-screen, actors were expected to drive themselves to distant locations. There was no transportation service. Ivonne drove her Cadillac 50 miles round trip each day. Catering was dropped completely after the first season. The cast had to pack their own lunches. One day, they staged a hunger strike and shut down filming for 2 hours. CBS even billed the actors for using dressing room phones, 25 cents per minute. And Fred Gwynne was once hit with a $500 phone bill. Over time, pay was denied regularly, and Al Lewis eventually sued and won back pay. Butch Patrick had to pay out of pocket for a rash caused by his makeup because the studio refused to cover it. Morale dropped. Crew members left. The money saved by cutting corners wasn't much, maybe $50,000, but it cost them the goodwill of the very people who made the show possible. And yet, even after all this, CBS almost threw it all away. When The Munsters was canceled in 1966, they considered selling syndication rights for just $500,000. That deal nearly went through. At the last minute, someone pulled the plug. It turned out to be the smartest thing they ever did. Reruns exploded in popularity. By 1980, syndication had brought in over $100 million. Merchandise deals that were originally sold off for pennies made toy companies millions. One company alone sold 500,000 Herman Munster dolls. International markets that CBS once ignored, like Japan and the UK, finally got the show, years late, but just in time to cash in on the global wave of monster mania. What made things even more chaotic was the unexpected monster versus monster showdown happening behind the scenes. The Munsters wasn't the only creepy family on TV in 1964. ABC had its own rival, the Addams Family. Both shows launched in the same month, and from day one, it became a dirty war. CBS played hardball. They made sure the Munsters aired at the same time as the Addams Family in key markets, instantly pulling viewers away. Then they took things even further. Internal documents later revealed that CBS spread rumors about the Addams cast. They planted fake stories in entertainment magazines, including one saying that Carolyn Jones was unstable and that the Addams set was haunted. Advertisers panicked. CBS even gave special discounts on other hit shows, like Gilligan's Island, to sponsors who agreed not to support the Addams Family. This aggressive move cost ABC $500,000 in just a few months. Things got so bad, cast members from the 2 shows were forbidden from being seen together in public. When a photo of Fred Gwynne and John Astin surfaced from a Hollywood party, it caused a minor scandal. CBS tightened its rules even more. Industry insiders later said it felt like political sabotage, dirty tricks straight out of Washington. Eventually, ABC filed a lawsuit accusing CBS of unfair tactics. The case was settled privately, but the damage was done. The Munsters' popularity came at a cost. Exhausted by the constant behind-the-scenes battles, the show was canceled in 1966, just as the Monster War reached its peak.